Welcome back. This is John, KC1VMZ. In this video, we will go through installing NetCentral on Linux. As an overview, we'll talk about the expectations you should have going into this presentation, as well as coming out of it. What are the prerequisites you'll need before you start doing this installation and getting it up and running? We'll go through the process. We'll actually run and install. It doesn't take very long, so we'll be able to spend time on that and show all the steps that it undertakes. And then once it's done and we've proven that it's up and running, we will then go under the covers of what the installation actually does so that you're more aware of the steps that it performs. So the expectations going into this video is that you have a running Linux system, whether it's Debian or Ubuntu. In this particular video, we're going to do the installation on a freshly imaged Raspberry Pi. And as part of that, you will need to have an internet connection so that it can download all the various updates and software. In the end, you would have a running NetCentral server, and it will be communicating to the internet and getting APRS data from the APRS IS servers. And as a prerequisite, other than Linux, you don't need any other software. There are some steps that you can skip if you already have software like Java 21 or MySQL installed. We'll see that as part of the installation. So the process we'll go through is downloading and running the NetCentral installer, answering the installation questions, registering 2 users that are necessary for the completion of the installation, configure the internet access, verify that it's all working, and you're done. So to begin the installation process, we need to get the netcentral_installer.sh file. We can get this from GitHub. We can download it using a wget command, and this will pull it down from GitHub onto the local machine. When we do this, we will pull it down. Now it is present, and we will need to make it executable. And once it's executable, we can start it up. As part of the installation, it will ask which version of NetCentral you wish to install. The releases are published up on GitHub at the time of this video. 1.0.11 was the most current. Check GitHub published releases for the most up-to-date version, and usually the script that you downloaded will already reference the last version that was published. So with here, we will choose that version. We will choose where we want to install NetCentral. This is going to be installed in my home directory under a NetCentral directory. Also, we'll create a temp space where certain files and log files will be created. In this particular video, we are not going to build NetCentral from source. We are going to get pre-built files from GitHub that have been uploaded and for this particular version, so we can skip everything relative to building from source. In this particular situation, because my machine was a brand new Trixie image on the Raspberry Pi, I need to install Java 21. Because I'm not going to build from source, I'm not going to download any of the developer tools. Things like Git, things like VS Code and Maven and the like, and the JDK. I have a choice of running a MySQL/Maria database locally. In this script, by default, we will install one locally on the machine and configure it properly. We will provide some default names of the database schema and the username and password. This part is very important in that there is an account that is necessary for NetCentral to have for all the various microservices to talk to each other. In this particular situation, I have it named service account, and I need to provide a password. You will need to remember this username and password for steps later. That'll be highlighted in the video. I can provide my call sign. There are cases where we need to know your call sign. NetCentral can be started either manually by running the jar files yourself, or you can work with the systemd installation on the operating system to auto start these at runtime. So in this video, we are going to set these up at services. We'll start them at boot time. We will also start them immediately so that they're running right after we've installed. In this video, we're going to connect to the internet services. This is a good way to get NetCentral up and running and prove that it's working without the nuances of connecting radios and dealing with KISS or things of that nature. Very easy to just talk to the internet server and verify the behavior. But when you talk to an internet server, it's going to want to know the query string relative to where do you want to get information from geographically. This, I happen to pick out a 500 kilometer circle around my longitude and latitude. You would convert this into something more appropriate to you. I also want you to enter your APRS IS passcode. If you're used to using the APRS IS servers, you know what that is and how to get it. And after that, it'll begin to install. It'll start installing dependencies like Java. It will also install other operating system. It'll do an APT or Yum update to get the latest components on your system, and then it'll start installing various dependencies like the JDK here, now getting into the Maria database so that you have a local database running. Because Node.js is used to implement the web server UI, it also needs to install NPM and a number of components relative to Node.js. Now it will retrieve the NetCentral built binaries that exist up on GitHub for the version that you specified at the very beginning of the install. It will download whatever jar files and zip files are necessary. It will install the various components that are required for Node.js. It will then create the service entries so that it will start up as services. And once the services have been created and started, everything is running on NetCentral now. So at this point, the software is up and running, but it needs to be configured. And the first part of the configuration is adding the 2 users mentioned earlier. Now, normally, if you were installing this locally on your Linux system, you would go to localhost. It would use the default HTTP server address for localhost. But because for this video I did a remote installation, I now will go to that machine's default web server address. So now I bring up the UI. I need to go to the Register tab menu, where I can type in, the first happens to be the user account that will be mine. This will be the system administrator account. I can make it an email address, I can make it a string, it can be whatever I'd like. I type in the password that I would like to use to log in and put in my call sign and register that. Now, I mentioned in the installation earlier that there is a separate service account that needs to be added as well. So if I put in the service account and the password that I provided earlier and no call sign and register that, now I can log in with the first account that I created. And you can see that NetCentral is running. But you'll notice that there are no stations being heard, nothing is being heard yet. This is because the transceiver, the microservice that wants to listen to the internet server, has not been set up yet. From here we go into the setup. If you select this transceiver for APRS-IS, you'll notice that on the right here it says that receive is not enabled, neither is transmit. If I go to the Actions tab and I enable receive and confirm it, and I enable transmit and confirm it, once I've enabled the receive and transmit, I can go back to the dashboard and notice that NetCentral is beginning to discover a number of different systems and call signs out on APRS and determining whether they are digipeaters or WinLinks or bulletin boards or weather stations. For greater detail, I can go into the Explorer menu and I can look at the different types of resources that it has determined that it can determine to exist, and I can filter on whether digipeaters. It has heard digipeaters, but it hasn't gotten locations for many of them yet. But if I go into, say, weather stations, I can see things like where they are located. I can scroll in and see where precisely these weather stations are. I can select them, and details will be displayed in the lower pane. There's an adjustable pane here. I can look at whether there have been weather reports provided. I can be able to scroll through the various past weathers that have been reported. And I can look at other types of stations and get information about them as well. Be able to go in and look at the information that's known about them. Let's take a little bit of a look underneath the covers of what the NetCentral installer does so that you'll be aware of what it performs, how it does it, if you need to make changes or you need to troubleshoot issues that you run into. The initial banner is displayed, and then the package manager is determined because different variants of Linux will use different package managers, and that's important later on in the installation. There are a number of default environment variables that are used to declare what options are being selected and not selected, and will help build configuration files later. There's a section on where it asked all the questions and putting those values into environment variables to be used later. We determine where we're going to get the files from NetCentral out on GitHub to be able to download. We will create a number of environment variables that will be saved in Etsy environment, and so it will write out entries to Etsy environment to keep track of these environment variables. It will then query as to whether you're using APRS-IS, and If you choose to, it will then do the same thing for other environment variables necessary for that to work properly. The installation directory is created, and then based on the package manager, a number of actions are taken. We'll just go from a look at Yum because it's essentially the same regardless of the package manager, just different commands. So we'll do one and it'll cover both. So here we do an update and we download unzip if it's not present already. We will install Java. We will install MariaDB as the MySQL database and initialize it. There's creating the schemas and users that NetCentral require. This is done by creating an environment variable and then piping that environment variable into the MySQL client to execute it properly. Because we're using Node.js, it will install NPM and it will set up some configurations for Linux to run properly with NPM and with Node.js. Linux does not like using low port numbers like the default HTTP server without beating it into submission with libcap. So that's done here. If you are installing the development tools, this is where it would install Git and code, and so that you could use it for later steps. Building a whole bunch of the temp directory structure that will get used at runtime. Then if you're building from source, which we didn't do as part of this video, it will do all the various steps needed to build from source. It will download Maven, it will build Maven, it will build the UI, it'll apply all the steps that Maven requires to get this built and copy all of the target files into a common area to be used for later execution. But we didn't do that as part of this video. So what we did do is we retrieved the binaries, we created a UI directory, we went out to GitHub, downloaded a number of files, the various transceivers. Each of these transceivers talks to a different radio technology or the internet. We make them executable. We then unzip the downloaded user interface. This is all Node.js, and put it in the correct place so that we can then do an npm install. So this will go and fetch all the various dependencies and get Node.js and NetCentral running properly. If you chose to install NetCentral as a set of services, this is where it will write out the various systemd service files. Rather than creating external files and downloading them and managing them, this builds them line by line and puts in the appropriate information based on the environment variables and choices that were made in the install. So ultimately it will create a service file for the server, a service file for APRSIS, and a service file for the user interface. Once it's created those, it will reload system control, it will enable the various services, and it will then start them. We'll skip over what it does for APT. And then what you saw at the end was the fact that we're done. We've put environment variables here, we have created the database, we've installed the services, and we've cleaned up. And that in the end is what it does under the covers. So, thank you for watching this video. Show you how easy it is to install NetCentral on Linux. It gave you some understanding of the process, what it requires, what you end up with, as well as give you a peek under the hood as to how it does it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on the netcentral.groups.io. That way you can interact with others who are using NetCentral and ask questions, help troubleshoot if you run into problems. By all means, please take a look at the website at www.kc1vmz.com or snap a picture of the QR code and it'll take you there as well. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to your use of NetCentral.